Welcome back to Mind of Messiah Ministries. This is Sharon Cluck. Today, we did Genesis 10 through 12, which is about the Tower of Babel. Along about 35 minutes, I say something about Molech. It should be Dagon. Talking about going into the temple of Dagon, and I said Molech. So I'm correcting myself before we get into it. This is an amazing teaching. It's a doozy, just like some of the others that we have done recently. I hope you'll give us a thumbs up, a like. Please leave your comments below. We would really like to hear what you have to say. Just tell us where you're listening from. We'd like to hear that. We have a lot of people watching, but we don't have a lot of comments, and we'd really like to know, what do you think about this? These are things that I teach today that I didn't know for years, and I'm so grateful that these things have come uncovered in the recent days. Stay tuned. I'm sure you're going to learn something, and I'll see you at the end. Thank you. I am going to unveil for you today maybe some secrets that you have not learned before. I know some of us are already studying some of this stuff. But on the board behind us, I have all of the offspring of Ham, where they went and what nations that they became. If you have an understanding of that, before we go into the rest of the book of Genesis, you will begin to understand where all these enemies come from and why they're there. What I want to have you understand today is that there is a spirit behind anti-Semitism. There is a reason why it's always Israel against the world. And there is a spirit behind that. There's a reason why the Apostle Paul tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of darkness in heavenly places. So today we're going to look and see where those principalities came from. How did they get started? And how are they still operating today? If we begin to understand that there's a spirit behind what we're battling, we will have a better understanding of how we're supposed to pray. What are we praying against? We're just not talking about bad guys that are heads of nations. We're talking about spirits over nations. And we are going to see that today. As we get into the scriptures on the Tower of Babel, I'm going to share some other scriptures that I'm going to bring in for you that will open this up for you, and you'll begin to understand what happened. Ham is the originator of all occult religions. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Ham: Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. So I've condensed and I've shortened this to just show the major players, who they came from and where they ended up living. In Genesis 10:2, the sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tyrus. It begins with the youngest son of Noah. So when we look at these generations, it doesn't begin with the oldest. You would think it would be Shem, Ham, and Japheth, but it doesn't. Genesis 10:5. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. And the sons of Ham: Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan. So these are all the major players that we're going to see throughout the book of Genesis. Verse 7, and the sons of Cush were Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Sabteka. And the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth, and that's according to the ESV. It says, instead of mighty one, it says Gibor, Gibor. So in the Hebrew, from the Strong's Concordance, the number in the Strong's, if you care about that, is H1368. It means powerful, by implication a warrior, a tyrant, a champion, a chief. It means to excel, and it also means giant. He became a giant. A man that's mighty, a mighty one. He's strong and a valiant man. Genesis 10:9. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore, it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Before the Lord is a phrase that means in the face of God. It doesn't mean that he was just good at shooting bow and arrow and bringing in the hunting and bringing in the animals or whatever he got. It means that he was before the Lord. He was actually in the face of God. He was a rebel before God. He was defiant. He hunted both men and animals, and he enslaved them. It's said of Nimrod that he is the greatest example of Antichrist that has ever lived on the face of the earth. He would enter a city and he would hunt men and make them slaves. The phrase before the Lord means in opposition to Yahweh. The Septuagint renders it a mighty hunter against the Lord. So the Greek Old Testament, which was written, it's our earliest translation from the Hebrew, is called the Septuagint. And in the Septuagint, it says he is a mighty hunter against the Lord. He was an empire builder who started his rise to power in Shinar in the lower Mesopotamian river valley. And he built many cities, and he spread even into Assyria, building the great city of Nineveh. So if you remember the story of Jonah, he is sent to Nineveh because it's so wicked. He's sent to there to tell them to repent or God will destroy them, and God gives them 90 days. Nimrod was later mythologized as the god Apollo. So if you remember in the New Testament, we see that when the emperor stands up and allows himself to be called God, that the angel strikes him with worms and he's eaten up on the spot. That's what these emperors did. They declared themselves to be God. It's the same thing that we're going to see when we get into the Exodus. We'll see that Pharaoh believed that he was a god. He had lots of other gods, but he himself believed that he was a god. So in verse 8, he became a mighty hunter. He was a mighty on the earth, and he began to be, in Hebrew, Chalat, Chalat, and it means to become profane, defiled, polluted, or desecrated, whether ritually, sexually, or genetically. In modern language, and according to Dr. Lake, in his text, it says, and Nimrod began to change genetically, becoming a Gibberine, the offspring of the watchers on earth. So when we wonder how the giants began to return, as we go through this, we're going to look at how on earth did that happen. So the Septuagint renders him as a giant that built the tower. That's what the Septuagint says. He is the giant who built the tower, a warrior and a rebel against God. So the elite have longed to replicate what Nimrod was able to do. He was a fully grown man who was able to become a Gibborim, another type of Nephilim. He was not born that way. He was able to alter his DNA and become a Nephilim. In Shinar, in the Shinar Directive, it's a book by Dr. Lake called the Shinar Directive. It talks about everything that was beginning to be planned and created within the area around Babel. Shinar is the area of Babel. In Genesis 6, watchers required a woman's womb to accomplish this, but Nimrod accomplished this. They call it an alchemical feat, a magical transformation, a quest to transform matter and spirit without the use of a woman's womb. Is this what the coming man of sin plans to do? Yeah, I see some heads going, yeah. With the transhumanist movement. So there is a whole plan for humans to become human 2.0, where they're going to, our human 1.2, or however they're going to label it. There's a whole movement to make us something besides human. Right now, we have the DNA that has God's name stamped on our DNA. The enemy would like to change that. He hates the fact that we are created in the image of God. Josephus says that Nimrod persuaded people to ascribe their happiness to him rather than to God. He defied God, and he defied God to send another flood. He was angry about the fact that the ancestors had been killed in the flood, including the giants, because he related to them. And he defied God. I dare you, God, to send another flood. So in Genesis 10:10, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Out of the land went forth Asher and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth and Keilah. Verse 14, out of Mitzrayim came the Philistines. I have that on the board. So out of Mitzrayim, so whenever you hear the word Mitzrayim, you can associate that with Egypt. We see that in a lot of your, like your CJB, it will use your Complete Jewish Bible. It won't even use the name Egypt. It'll use the word Mitzrayim. In verse 15, from Canaan came Sidon and Heth and all of the ites. So all of your ites came out of Canaan. So when we see these down here and they go into the promised land, who are they conquering? All of the ites. So you have the Hivites, the Girgasites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Archites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Simitrites, the Hamathites, the Canaanites are spread all abroad. All of those ites come out of Canaan. And if you remember, he is the fourth born of Ham. He is the one who got cursed by Noah. In verse 22, all the way down in that chapter, is from Shem comes Eber, and later Eber is called Hebrew, are the Hebrews. Who do all of these people become? The sons of Ham. Cush becomes Ethiopia, Arabia, Babylon, India, and the modern day Sudan. Mitzrayim becomes Egypt, upper and lower, called the land of Ham. They also become the Philistines. Put becomes Libya and Africa. Canaan becomes Palestine, Arabia, Tyre and Sidon, and all of the promised land, and they are forever the enemies of Israel. Nimrod claimed to be the son of Balus. Now we're getting into the mythological gods. So Cush is now called Balus or Bel, the god Bel. He was a founder of Babel, and Cush, the father of Nimrod, becomes Bel, and he's also known as Hermes. So I have that on the board. So Cush becomes Hermes. Later, he becomes Mercury, and after that, he becomes the sun god. So all of that mythology that we have comes from human beings that altered their being or altered their selves or saw themselves as a god and presented themselves as being gods. They built massive cities, and when they built the huge cities, they insisted that their subjects would worship them, give them glory as God, and they declare that they are gods. That's where all of this stuff comes from. I don't know about you, but nobody ever explained that to me. I didn't learn that when I was, I learned all the mythology stuff about that. I knew a little bit about it, but I never knew that it started with human beings. I thought this was all made up stuff that these other countries made up. Well, they did, but they made them up that started with human beings who declared themselves to be God because they were rulers over great nations. It's just like in the New Testament, like I mentioned to you before, that the emperors would be eaten up by worms if they claimed to be gods. So these are men whose status claimed to be God. Hermes is an Egyptian synonym for the son of Ham. The offspring of the sons of God are called Gibborim in Genesis 6:4, and Nimrod is called a Gibbor in Genesis 10:8-9 in the ESV. So emperors who claim to be God. These are some of them. August Caesar in Luke 2:1. Tiberius Caesar in Luke 3:1. Gaius Caesar demanded worship and attempted to put a statue of himself in the Jerusalem temple. That's how much he believed he was God. He thought he was God over the creator God. Nero, Domitian. His persecution is related to the time of the book of Revelation. That's who was in power, Domitian, at the time that John wrote the book of Revelation. The Antichrist will also declare himself to be God, and we see that in Revelation 13. Calling Jesus Lord in those days was equivalent to calling him the emperor. That's why they persecuted Christians. That's why those followers of Yeshua were seen to be serving another king, and they were. We have no king but Jesus, and they kept saying, we have no king but Caesar. They may as well have been saying, we have no other God. So an ambassador of Judas Maccabees and an early Jewish historian named Eupolemus, in his work on the Jews, states that the Assyrian city of Babylon was first founded by those who escaped the flood. They were giants. They were the ones who built the tower. So we've got that in a number of historical writings. We have it in Josephus. We have it in this Eupolemus. We have it in the ESV. We have it in the Septuagint. We have it in several places where it's confirmed that it was giants that built the tower. Cush was the leader of the pack and leading people away from Yahweh. Hermes translates to the hot or the burning one, and that's who Cush becomes. He becomes Hermes, and then Mercury, and then the sun god. The hot burning one becomes the sun god because that's what Hermes means. So this identifies him with the sun. It then makes a leap to be known as Horus, the sun god. So he's also known as Nebo, the prophetic god. This is their religion. Cush is known by many names, and he is the author of all pagan religions. In Jeremiah 1:2 it reads Bel, which we talked about over here, Balis and Bel. Bel is confounded. That is, the confounder is brought to confusion. Eventually, he becomes Janus, another name for him, the god of gods, who calls himself confusion and chaos. How would you like to be called confusion and chaos? This is what Paul is probably reminding them of in 1 Corinthians 14:33, where he says, for God is not the author of confusion, but of peace in all churches of the saints. For God is the God of harmony, not confusion, as is the pattern in all the churches of God, holy believers. That's from the TPT. So the newly converted Corinthians had one foot in Christianity and the other in paganism. The influence of their gods was pronounced chaos. It was producing chaos. So Paul had the job of helping these new converts to be able to separate the God of Abraham from these pagan gods. They grew up believing this stuff. So now they have this God of Abraham that they have to leave all these other gods behind and embrace this God of Abraham. It's a whole new different concept. This is a God who dies for their subject. It's not a God who expects you to die for them or to give up your children to Molech or to sacrifice to them constantly. Our God dies for us. So Dr. Lake shares in his book, The Shinar Directive, that Cush claimed the prophetic ability to channel instructions and the will of the now banished watchers to humanity. He was called the illuminated one, thus the organization that ultimately is called the Illuminati. Ding. Does all this start adding up? Yeah. So this is where he received instructions on building of Babylon and of the tower and on how to become a Gibberine, how to alter his DNA to become a giant again. In Zephaniah 2:12, God foretells his judgment on Cush. You too, Ethiopians, will be put to death by my sword. That's in the CJB. In the Hebrew, a Cushite is a descendant of Cush or an Ethiopian, either one of those. Interestingly, the Canaanites didn't become gods. I would have expected that. I would have expected with the curse on Canaan that he would have actually become a god, but he didn't. So all the esoteric knowledge that the Watchers provided to Nimrod's bloodline will not save them from God's judgment. And Dr. Lake says in the Shiner Directive that no promise of godhood, immorality, or transcendency, whether offered by Lucifer elite or the evangelists of transhumanism, will save them. So Nimrod gains the knowledge that he has from Cush, who channels it from the Watchers. He became a global king, and he used this knowledge to enslave people, establish a religious system, and lead many men away from the one true God, Yahweh. He was raised to be an elite, one who is illuminated with the forbidden knowledge that was promised to Adam in the garden. No new tricks. The atom bomb and evil that we see all over the world, the war machines, these are evil technology that are being passed down and channeled still from the Watchers. If it brings death, if it brings destruction, is coming from the God of death. While Cush was busy working with Nimrod to establish Babylon, Ham worked with Mitzrayim to establish Egypt, which was called the land of Ham, and then joins with them in their efforts. Nimrod's name means, let us revolt. That's what Nimrod means, let us revolt. He was a ruthless leader opposed to all existing authority. Nimrod possessed both demonic intelligence and supernatural strength that enabled him to enslave people through the tyranny and through force. He developed the first one world religion. Like I said, he is the perfect example of Antichrist. And he is the perfect type and shadow of the Old Testament Antichrist. No other figure in history of the Bible, nor even in Pharaoh of Egypt, comes close to personifying the Antichrist the way that Nimrod did. He declared open war on God. So here's an FYI. The European Union has built its headquarters as a replica of the Tower of Babel. They are also in rebellion against the one true God. Another scholar, A.W. Pink, says of Nimrod that he was the Antichrist of the Old Testament. Babylon was called the city of the devil, always opposed to Jerusalem, the city of God. Babylon was the distributor of every kind of confusion, idolatry, and impiety, and sin involving every foul pollution, crime, and iniquity. He is said to be more ruthless than all other despots in history combined. He was a genius in military tactics and a powerful politician. He developed cities and he created religions that spread like cancer in the world. His influence was so significant that families would willingly offer their children to Moloch, another one of their gods. So Michael Lake says about Nimrod that he would be the perfect world leader today. His words would drop like honey. He could mesmerize the masses. He would blend sophistication and savagery. Safety, security, health, pleasure, and prosperity would be extended to those who give unquestionable loyalty, and then tyranny to anyone who opposes him. Babylon was at least 100 square miles, about 5 times larger than the city of London. And some said it was 200 square miles, or 10 times the size of London. Babylon and Assyria were known as the granaries of Asia. It was surrounded by walls 400 feet high. I can't even fathom that. On the top, 4 chariots, each drawn with 4 horses wide, could pass side by side in the center. A large, magnificent park was irrigated by machinery. The king had 12 palaces surrounding the great temple of the sun god, which he believed he was, with its 600-foot tower and gigantic golden statue. The Tower of Babel was approximately 8,150 feet tall. The idea was to defy God if he ever flooded the earth again. So if the walls didn't hold back the water, the tower would provide them refuge. And then Josephus confirms this purpose in the building of the tower. Nimrod pledged to avenge himself on God for destroying his ancestors. And then Dake says that Nimrod's whole purpose was to draw men away from God. His religion included human sacrifice. The purpose is to gain or to release spiritual power. It's no different than the occult today. They do human sacrifice for the purpose of opening up portals or gaining additional spiritual power. It opens up spiritual portals. It tells us in the Shiner Directive that all occult holidays, all of them are listed within this book. And if you ever want to look at that, that's the Shiner Directive on page 102. And these are a lot of holidays that were established back then that Christians are still celebrating. And so these are things that we need to take a look at to find out what we're participating in. So before we see what happened spiritually when the tower was destroyed, we're going to see where Canaan settles. So now let's see where Canaan ends up. He inhabits the promised land. His land had walled cities, and each with its each city had a mayor and a king, and they served many gods. The head was El, or Baal, as many of you call him. Hadad was the storm god. So this is one thing that I do all the time when they tell us we're going to have severe weather or storm. I go outside and I just go, listen, storm gods, you're not coming here. We'll take the rain, but we're not taking your lightning, we're not taking your thunder, and we're not taking your high winds in Jesus' name, because the king lives inside of me and I have authority over you and your gods. You're not coming here. And Ben could tell you, I've had neighbors actually call and say, is everything okay over there? But they can thank me later because the whole subdivision has been safe from storms. And it's not me. It is the power of God that he puts in each one of us to be able to use the dominion that he gave us at the time he created us. We have got to know who we are. We've got to be able to stand. We have last days that we're going to have to learn to stand through. Haden was the storm god, and they served Dagon and Ashtaroth and Vulcan. These were gods and goddesses of sex and of war. Ashtaroth was called the Queen of Heaven. In Deuteronomy 12:29, it says, when the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, whether thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwell in their land, take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, why do these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. This is why we look to see what it is we participate in every area of our life. What have we brought into our house? What are we opening up on the TV? What are we listening to on YouTube? What are we letting into our house? Are we participating in any way with the things that were established back at this point? None of that has ceased. The enemy is still wicked. We still have principalities and powers and rulers of darkness that we have to contend with. And we're going to see that even more as we go through the rest of this. Thou shalt not do unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do. Thou shalt not add unto nor diminish from it. So the whole time that we're teaching out of Genesis, this is not so we can be super smart or be educated or intelligent or no more than anybody else. It's because we need to have understanding of what God has said to us, that we're not adding to his word and we're not taking away from his word, and we understand the roots of some of the things that we're dealing with. So much of this stuff has never been taught to the church, and we have no idea where the roots came from. How did this evil all get started? Yes, it started in the garden with sin, but sin is not the only corruption we're dealing with. We're dealing with the fallen angels that came in Genesis 6, and then we're dealing about the second incursion that happens again at the Tower of Babel. There is more than one thing that Jesus came to overcome. It's up to us to see that we have not incorporated the traditions of these gods into our worship of Yahweh. Do they come from the Bible or any other source? After the flood, giants began to appear on the earth again. Interestingly, they were primarily through Ham's line. Many of the descendants of Ham and Japheth, both, were Nephilim, according to history. What we see is equal to Genesis 3 and 6 in the Tower of Babel. Those three major rebellions, Jesus came to overthrow them. And when God destroyed the Tower of Babel, the giants scattered throughout the earth, but God still wanted a family. His initial intention is to have a family. Cindy and I talked about that this weekend, that God started out to have a family, and before it's finished, he will have a family. Isaiah 34, 2 and 4 tell us this, how this all ends. For Adonai is angry at every nation, furious with all of their armies. He has completely destroyed them, handed them over to slaughter. Verse 4, the whole host of heaven, that's not just the stars and the moon and the sun, that is the whole host of heaven, will decompose. The heavens themselves will be rolled up like a scroll. All their array will wither away like a withering grape leaf that falls from a vine and a withered fig from a fig tree. Isaiah 24:21. When that day comes, Adonai will punish the armies of the high heavens on high. Who are these high heavens that he's going to punish? Adonai will punish the armies of the high heavens on high. Who is that? And the kings of the earth here on earth. So his punishment isn't just to what's on earth. His punishment is also to things that are in the heavens. We're going to see who that is. Genesis 11:1. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name. Their name they want to make is the one that conquered God, the Creator. Lest we become scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men had built. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do, or been instructed through whatever they're channeling. Let us go down, and there confound their language. And again, we see let us. If you've read my book and there's a chapter on the divine council, you'll understand who's having this conversation. Let us go down, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, And they left off building the city. Now, that all just sounds very simple. It just sounds like, well, God saw this and he fixed it this way. But there's a whole bunch more to that that we can find in other places in the scripture. We have got to learn how to connect the dots. God is cyclical, and he keeps bringing us back to the same thing. His whole plan is for us to be with him and to have a family. Therefore, is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth, all the earth. So Babylon is a temple complex. That's what the whole city is a temple complex. They're building a house for their deity, which they believe is their human leader who has become a Nephilim. And that's what an idol is. Demons are invited to fill a man-made object. So everywhere that you see that they have even the little objects or they have the big, huge ones. If you remember that when the Ark of the Covenant was stolen by the Philistines and they took it into the temple of Molech, what happened to Molech? He fell on his face, his head fell off and his hands broke. And he fell on the threshold. And even today, anybody that worships that God will not step on the threshold because the hands of Molech ended up on the threshold when they broke off. So God is always judging the other gods. Well, what happens when they build these idols? Then they have a service and they invite demon spirits to come into those objects. And then those objects are given territorial oversight. So if you remember, Paul goes into Ephesus and they have the goddess Diana. Well, that's her territory. That's why they wanted to run them up. You've come into Diana's territory and you're trying to present another God to us. These gods are pulled into an object by a spirit and they are given a territory. That's why you can go into that city and that city and that city, and they all have different gods. Or they may have one of the same gods, but it rules this part of the city and the other God rules that part of the city. So that's what they were doing at Shinar with the Tower of Babel. They were inviting their God to inhabit this massive object. So the Lord scatters them. In Deuteronomy 31, 8 and 9, the Septuagint reads this way. When the Most High divided the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the nations according to the number of the angels of God. What? When the Most High divided the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the nations according to the number of the angels of God. And his people Jacob became the portion of the Lord. Israel was the line of God's inheritance from then on. Some versions say he divided the lands according to the sons of Israel, but Israel doesn't exist at the time of Babel. Sons of God is the correct translation. God is divorcing the nations, and now he needs new people, and he will start all over with the call of Abraham. This is how the TLB says it. When God divided up the world among the nations, he gave each of them a supervising angel. Can't make this stuff up. Here's the ESV. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. The Message Bible. When the high God gave the nations their stake, gave them their place on earth, he put each of the peoples within a boundary under the care of divine guardians. Are you beginning to understand why it's Israel against the world? The NLT. When the Most High God assigned lands to the nations, when he divided up the human race, he established the boundaries of the people according to the number of his heavenly court. The NRS. When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the people according to the number of the gods. That's why we started off today and we started singing, "O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in the heaven. There is no God like you in the earth. O Lord God of Israel, who keeps covenant and shows mercy to those who follow after him with all of their heart." There is more than one God. There is only one supreme God, but there are gods over the nations. The NRS says, when the Most High appointed the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the gods. Yahweh is disinheriting the nations, and it's the beginning of the call of Abraham. And you'll begin to understand why it's always been Israel against all other nations. What is the passion to always destroy Israel? Where is that coming from? It's coming from the principalities over the nations. This was God's portion on the earth. He chose Jerusalem. He chose Israel. It's the fallen one's passion to overthrow Yahweh, and they plan to do that by destroying Israel. Just as they thought to crucify Jesus would defeat Yahweh, this God against the God. Furthermore, the gods over the nations begin to fight one another, just like they did in Genesis 6. So this is where we see the Prince of Persia in chapter 10 of the book of Daniel. It is a god over a kingdom. In Ezekiel, we see the Prince of Tyre. In Psalms 82, we see clearly that these princes over the nations become corrupt. So God appoints angelic beings over nations to supervise them, and they become corrupt. Let me read to you Psalms 82. Elohim, God stands in the divine assembly. Again, the divine council. There with the Elohim and judges, he judges. So these are other Elohim. That's a small e, Elohim. How long will you go on judging unfairly, favoring the wicked? Give justice to the weak and fatherless. Uphold the rights of the wretched and the poor. Rescue the destitute and the needy. Deliver them from the power of the wicked. These are God's instruction to these gods that are over the nations. They don't know. They don't understand. They wander about in darkness. And meanwhile, all the foundations of the earth are being undermined. That's what we see happening. Look at the earth. Yahweh told Israel, if they did not keep the commandments, that the earth would spew them out. If you go into Israel and you don't keep my commandments, the land will spew you out. That's what's happening to the earth. The tornadoes, the flooding, the hurricanes, the volcanoes, the earthquakes, the earth is revolting because we are made of the earth. The earth, we are made of dirt. The earth is one with humankind in some fashion. And when we become corrupt, the earth becomes corrupt with us. That's why in Romans 8, it says that all the earth is groaning in travail for the sons of God to be manifest. It's waiting for you and I to stand up and take the authority and the dominion that God gave us from the very beginning. So he's telling them how to rule because they're not ruling righteously. But all the foundations of the earth are being undermined. So we see the results of this every day. The earth is crying out for justice. In Psalms 82:6, my decree is you are Elohims, gods, judges, gods of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, you will die like mortals. Like any prince, you will fall. Rise up, Elohim, and judge the earth, for all the nations are yours. God will claim all the nations, and the earth shall be filled with the knowledge and the glory of the Lord, like the waters cover sea. I don't know about you, but that's shotting ground. So this is Yahweh's objective, is to reclaim all of the earth. We wrestle not against principalities, but powers and rulers of darkness in heavenly places. These are all his. And we believe from what we see in Daniel 10 that Michael is the one who is the Prince of Israel. He battled for Israel. In Yeshua's resurrection, he doesn't just deal with the sin of Adam in the garden. He is reversing Genesis 6 and also what happened at the Tower of Babel. There are 3 rebellions that are overcome by the resurrection of our great God and King, Yeshua. There continues an unseen spiritual conflict between the nations of the earth that are overseen by the fallen. So God is choosing the beginning of redemption. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and he begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Now we're going to skip down all the way down to verse 24 in Genesis 11. And Nahor lived 29 years, and he begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years, and he begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And this is where our story begins. It's our story. It's not just the story of Abraham, it's ours. We are the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. God is choosing a family and a land to start over with. Now, these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abraham, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. So the book of Jubilees begins Abraham's story as a 14-year-old boy. They're in Ur of the Chaldeans, was a major Sumerian city in southern Mesopotamia, and it flourished about 2100 to 1900 BCE. It was a center of moon god worship, particularly of Sin Nana, the name of this god, whose ziggurat dominated the skyline. Abraham's father, Terah, likely participated in the polytheistic culture, possibly serving in Nimrod's court, according to Jewish tradition. He was a maker of idols. So the father of Abraham was a maker of idols. All of this can be found in the book of Jubilees. It's quite a story. It's really interesting. I didn't quote any of it here. I may give you a few of the highlights in it. Genesis 11:28, and Haran died before his father. So Terah has had a son. Haran dies before his father. Terah in the land of nativity in Ur of the Chaldeans, prophetic birth, that's Nimrod's astrologers foresaw Abram's birth as a threat to his rule. And Terah, fearing for his son's life, hid Abram in a cave for 10 years. So I'm just going to kind of summarize this for you. The story goes like this in the book of Jubilees. It says that Abram was the youngest son of Terah. And when he is born, they have a big celebration, and Terah is part of the court of Nimrod. He's actually one of the idol makers. And they have a big celebration, but when they come out of the celebration, 3 of the astrologers look up and they see stars. And they see a star, one star that's overcoming other stars. And they run to Nimrod and they say, there's something about this son that Terah just had, and he will overcome your kingdom. So Nimrod is afraid of this baby. And I know this sounds a whole lot like the birth of Jesus, but he decides that he's going to kill this baby. Well, Terah says, I'm not going to bring my son to be killed. He's my youngest son. I'm not going to do that. So he brings the child of one of his servants, and he allows that child to be killed by Nimrod. He hides Abram in a cave for 10 years. And at 10 years, Abram is sent then to live with Noah and Shem. Abram is taught about the God of heaven and earth, Yahweh, the one true God. He stays there till he's in his 30s, and he comes back home, and his dad has all these idols, and he has just a complex with huge idols that he's worshiping every day. And he has an idol for every month. And he brings in food and drink, but none of them ever drink or eat. And so Abram decides he's going to go feed the idols. And he makes this big feast. And he takes it before the idols, and nobody eats and nobody drinks. And so he decides, this is so foolish. He said, I can't believe my dad is worshiping all these idols that can't talk and they can't see. And so he chops them all up except for the largest one with an axe. And then he puts the axe in the hand of the biggest idol. When his dad finds out what he's done, he comes to him and he goes, what have you done? He said, I didn't do that. Look, the axe is in the hand of your biggest idol. And his dad says, you know I don't believe that. I know that you're lying to me. And he said, that idol can't kill all the other idols. And he says, then Dad, why are you serving them? Why are you serving them? And his dad gets so angry that he runs to Nimrod and he tells him what his son did. And Nimrod says, bring him to me right away. Well, Abram is brought to Nimrod, and he does the same thing. He tells the same thing to Nimrod, and Nimrod is just furious because his gods have been found out, and his idols. And so he decides to heat up the furnace, and Nimrod says to Abram's father, Terah, so why did you hide this child from me? Who told you to do that? Well, the father don't want to get killed, so he blames it on Haran, his oldest son. He said, yeah, Haran, I think Haran is like 34 years older than Abram. He says, well, Haran came up with that idea. He said, well, then we'll throw him in the fire too. So he throws Haran and Abraham both in the fire. Haran dies in the fire, who is the father of Lot. But Abraham, he lives through the fire. And they finally haul him out of the fire. And when they do, Nimrod is so amazed that he makes him a rich man. He gives him, that's where Eliezer supposedly comes from. He gives him the servant Eliezer. He gives him 300 men. If you see him fighting later on, he has 300 warriors with him. Supposedly they came from Nimrod, and they're all faithful to Abram, and they're all serving Abram's God. And he becomes wealthy. So that's the story in a nutshell of what you're going to find in the book of Jubilees. But God has now called out this man who knows that he is God. And eventually, Terah becomes afraid. He becomes afraid of Nimrod, and he leaves with, when his son Haran gets killed in the fire, he leaves with Abram and his brother and Sarah and Bilhah and Lot, and they all go to another town. And that's where we pick up here, where God is calling Abram, and he will soon become Abraham. Abram lived through the furnace, and Nahor died in the fire. So this is super exciting story in the book of Jasher and Jubilees. So they tell how Abram escapes with Eliezer and 300 men and many riches. And there's a migration and there's a divine calling. God is calling Abraham out. So he's already got a relationship with God because he has lived with Noah and Shem as a child. So I always wondered about this when I read the scriptures. How did God just call somebody out of an idolatrous country that knew nothing about him? How was he able then to tap this person and say, this is the guy I'm going to start my new family with? So Terah eventually led the family to Ur towards Canaan. Settling in Haran, which is another moon worship city. And after Terah's death, Abram receives this divine call to continue the journey to Canaan in Genesis 11:29. And Abram and Nahor took their wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran. So these are the daughters of their brother who got killed in the fire. And the father of Milcah, the father of Ishka. Genesis 11:30. But Sarai was barren, and she had no children. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, and his son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son's Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan, and they came into Haran and dwelt there. So they ultimately named that city after their son. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Now Adonai said to Abram, get yourself out of this country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go into the land that I show you. What I know about many people in this congregation is that you didn't have to leave your family to serve God. Many people do. Many people are isolated in their families. I know that I am an anomaly in my household, in my family. They just think I am the strange one. So he is being called away from his family. It's an ungodly atmosphere. It's dangerous. And God is calling him out to a new place, a new land, to serve a new God. And when we get born again, oftentimes God separates us. He pulls us out. We know that about anybody that's been in any kind of drug rehab or alcoholism and their family's still involved with it. God will pull them out away from that so that they're not pulled back into the danger or the darkness. Genesis 12:1. Now Yahweh said to Abram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go into the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. So he's going to be blessed, and he's going to be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Woohoo! But I will curse anyone who curses you. And by you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. That's us. So Abram went as Adonai had said to him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, and all their possessions which they had accumulated. So there's the story that we got out of the Apocrypha. He did accumulate some things, as well as the people that he had acquired in Haran. And they set out from the land of Canaan, for the land of Canaan, and entered into the land of Canaan. And Abraham passed through the land in a place called Shechem to the oak of Morah and Canaan, where then the Canaanites, I'm reading this in the Hebrew, so I'm trying to get over the words that aren't written in English. The Canaanite were in the land at that time. And Adonai appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Adonai, who had appeared to him. He left that place, went to the hill east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. He built an altar there and called on the name of Adonai. And then Abram traveled on, continuing toward the Negev. So that's to Genesis 12:9. It is customary to build an altar any place that you meet with Yahweh. It's customary that, according to God, that altar has no hewn stone. It is just bare stones. And you build them not under a tree, because he doesn't want them in a grove like the temples and the altars to other gods. And it is our understanding that when we meet with God, that it's okay to build a marker to remember where we were at that date. Where did God meet us? What did he say to us? What was our covenant? When a covenant is made, they build an altar. Ben and I built an altar in our back garden area when we first moved there. And we actually had communion with the land. We poured in oil and wine and honey, milk and honey, and we claimed that this land belonged to the Lord, that it was not ours. This was land that he had given us, and he would send his angels to protect us. The manifestation of angelic beings on that piece of property has been spectacular. And I thank God that we were obedient and did what he told us to do. So as I close, I want to read just a couple of scriptures that I think will help us to understand this a little bit better. In Psalms 89:5, let the heavens praise your wonders, Adonai, your faithfulness in the assembly of the angels. There is an assembly of angels. For who in the skies can be compared to Adonai? Who of these gods can rival Adonai? Who can rival our great God? They may be called gods, but they are not the God. A God dreaded in the great assembly of the holy ones and feared by all around him. And then in 2 Chronicles 6:14, when Solomon dedicates the temple, and he says, Adonai, God of Israel, there is no God like you in the heaven or on the earth. You keep covenant with your servants and you show them grace. Provide them life in your presence with all their hearts. And then in Exodus 20, verse 3 and 4, thou shalt have no other gods. Who are these other gods? It's not because you like baseball. It's not because you like to make money. There are other gods. There are principalities and powers and rulers of darkness. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. I think those scriptures pretty well show us that there is more than one God. There's only one creator. There is only one Yod He Vav He, whose name is stamped and imprinted on our very being, our very DNA. He loves us. He sends his angelic beings to minister to us. He has angels that are loyal to his throne, that are involved in our life every single day. He hasn't left us alone. We're not in this alone. And he has included us into the family of Abraham. And we are his seeds according to the promise. So I hope that opens your eyes a little bit to see where all this violence against the nation of Israel comes from. Where is the anti-Semitism coming from? It is from the other nations that are ruled. It's a spiritual thing. It's starting first in the heavenlies by their gods that rule over them, that are rebelled against God, that influence the leadership of their countries to say, we hate Israel. God of Israel wins in the end, because we read the back of the book. Father, I praise you and I thank you for this word. I just thank you. You're such a great, great God. I thank you for opening up our minds to help us to understand, for giving us wisdom, for clearing things up that maybe have been hidden from us for all of our life. Father, you're such an amazing God. We glorify you, we honor you with our lives and with our thanksgiving in Yeshua's name. Amen. Thank you so much for staying to the end. I appreciate your time. I know you have so many things you could watch. I'm so grateful for those that are really loyal to this channel, that love to hear what we have to share. I pray God blesses you. Please give us a thumbs up, a like, and a subscribe. Share this with other people. We love you. Thank you for joining us.